Jujutsu Kaisen is one of the craziest and coolest anime and manga that I've seen. I personally believe that it is the best new gen, but that is mainly because I have not had the same experience with other new gen. And what I mean by this is I'm caught up with My Hero Academia, Black Clover, Demon Slayer, and the Mob Psycho 100 anime, but I haven't read their manga. The only new gen manga that I have read is Tokyo Revengers, but I did end up dropping it later. And since I haven't read the manga for these popular new gens, some might discredit my opinion because of what happens in these new gen mangas that I'm just not aware of. This is completely understandable, but from everything I've seen, JJK just goes above and beyond the others. I will be discussing the anime and the manga, but I will give a manga warning and timestamp to skip it each time. On the surface, JJK's story is just like any other shonen. Guy has
demons coming inside me
and has to learn to overcome the hardships that come with it. But what makes JJK so unique is how it breaks these stereotypes. The evil entity doesn't become his friend. Sukuna is the king of curses and he plays the part of it. Whenever Sukuna gets released, there are consequences. I think it's done so perfectly that even if the subjects JJK uses aren't anything particularly new, it uses it in such a unique way. Another aspect that I love about the series is when a character dies, they die. These deaths have meaning and they define JJK as a series that you can't take lightly. Gege has no mercy for their characters, nor their readers. The story in the anime only covers the surface of what's to come. What's shown in the anime is still fantastic, don't get me wrong. It acts as a perfect introduction to these characters and to the world of JJK. You grow to love these characters, and while there are dark moments, they are not nearly the center point like they are in the manga. The story in the manga truly changes the way that JJK is viewed. I believe this is where JJK breaks away from other new gen. It truly is something special and that stands out from the rest. The animation for the movie and for season 1 are both spectacular. Mappa truly goes above and beyond with their animation for them. I can't name a single fight that looks bad. Every fight gets me hyped and excited. The attacks are so clearly animated that you can feel the impact with each and every attack. There's also a lot of cute moments with the anime's animation. The animation can truly look out of this world with some attacks like Gojo's Hollow Purple. If Mappa is able to keep the same level of animation, if not go above their standards, Season 2 will be nothing short of greatness. I feel the soundtrack does a very good job of enhancing the emotion of the scene, whether it's an intense fight or just a simple dialogue between two friends. I feel like the soundtrack accompanies it so well. You know, I wouldn't say it's one of my favorite OSTs, but I feel that it just goes way underappreciated. I've seen a lot of people complain how the art in JJK is sloppy and it looks unfinished. While yes, I will agree with you that there are panels here and there that look unfinished, I think it's generally just the style to have this loose feel to it, especially when it's in fights. But I really like the manga art a lot, and I think it fits the series really well. Cursed Energy is a very unique and interesting power system. Having the power system revolve around negative emotions allows Gege to write his characters in an interesting fashion. What I mean by this is while being angry and sad may cause them to become stronger, it's a double-edged sword because it can also cause them to trip up and cause a downfall. The characters must overcome their emotions in order to continue to grow as sorcerers. This relates back to what it means to be a sorcerer in the first place. Someone with conviction, someone who can stare death in the face with resolve. Curse techniques are a really cool concept for the show. Gege continues to experiment with different techniques that become more and more wild. It's one thing to have a really cool power, but it's another thing when the character that's given that power is able to utilize it so well that they build upon it and make such a simple idea become such an expanded one. You can also see how Gege has pulled their inspiration from other manga, such as Hunter x Hunter, when creating this power system. Domain expansions are one of my favorite parts about the power system. Being able to create a space to ensure a win always adds a fun trump card to each fight. It's just also interesting to see how different domains can act. Some domains like Gojo, Sukuna's, and Mahito's act like a guaranteed win, while we have other domains that happen in the manga that are more about strategic rule setting. I think it's just super interesting, and every time it happens, I get super excited. Overall, I think JJK has just one of the coolest power systems in any anime or manga. While it is one of my favorites, I can say with confidence that it is very confusing. Sometimes it's a deep explanation and you just nod your head and act like you understand when you really don't. It happens to me all the time, but with time, I start to understand the abilities more, and I feel that, yes, it's complicated at first, but once you start to get the hang of it, it's not nearly as complicated. JJK has some of my favorite fights. Season 1 has just an insane highlights with Yuji and Nanami versus Mahito, Yuji and Todo versus Hanami, and Yuji and Nobara versus the brothers. But I believe in the manga, the fights just get better and better. In fact, I think in the manga, the fights are at the series' best. While I won't say any fights directly right now to not give away spoilers, I just think anime onlys have so much to look forward to. These fights not only have crazy action, but have a lot of emotional backing with each and every one. These fights go above and beyond, displaying each character's strengths and growths. I also really enjoy how the fights are choreographed. When watching the anime, you can tell how differently each and every character fights. And in the manga, I think Gege does a great job of drawing the fights in an understandable way. Oftentimes when I'm reading manga and there's a fight, I have trouble following along. When I'm reading the fight, I often like to animate it in my head to see how the fight is really acting out. And sometimes I feel like I'm missing pieces and it's not flowing as well as I want it to. But with JJK, I've never had that issue. Just the way that Gege is able to draw it is so easily translated into my head. It might be hard to understand, but I feel like it just works so well. Another thing that's great about the fights is that they're all so great that anyone could be your favorite. Characters can make or break a series, and I think JJK has just gone out of the water with their characters. I believe it has one of the best main, side, and female casts of any new gen. So I'd just like to take a minute and go through these characters just to talk about them a little bit. Yuji is one of my favorite characters in JJK. I think his ideology of saving as many people as possible is really interesting because of how he's affected by the brutal world that JJK is. His drive to have a proper death is something that I find really fascinating. Dying to curses is a horrible way to go, so Yuji wants to ensure that everyone has a peaceful death where they're surrounded by loved ones. I also really enjoy him as a main character. I think he's extremely likable and relatable. He's just a teenager who holds this heavy burden of not letting this curse loose. He forms some amazing relationships with Megumi and Nobara, and it just brings a smile to my face with all their interactions. But since JJK is as brutal as it is, each arc Yuji's resolve and mental state is tested. This is first shown in the prison, where he couldn't save the inmates and almost himself. When Sukuna took over his body and was fighting Megumi, he was afraid of dying. It wasn't until he and Megumi were able to talk about both their convictions, both their ideologies, and outlooks on saving people, that they both came to an agreement that while neither one of them was truly correct, neither one of them was really wrong either. The next part that tests Yuji's resolve is with his relationship with Jinbei. Jinbei? What? The next part that would test Yuji's resolve is his relationship with Jinbei. I gotta make sure I'm saying this right. The next part that tests Yuji's resolve is his relationship with Jinpei, a troubled kid who takes his revenge on his bullies. The part that I love is in their fight when Yuji stops fighting to simply talk it out. His intention was to never fight Jinpei, but to understand him. But as we all know, Jinpei comes to an end against Mahito when he tries to make Sukuna make a binding vow with Yuji. A real wake-up call happens with Yuji as both curses laugh in his face. The line, "Alright, these are curses," speaks volumes for him. This world is cruel, and he's going to lose people he cares about. Sukuna is not and will not ever be Yuji's friend, and won't ever help him without an ulterior motive. As the story continues, we eventually get to the Goodwill event arc, where Yuji becomes brothers with Todo. Todo acts like a teacher to Yuji, helping him grow his skills as a sorcerer exponentially. Yuji becomes more confident in his abilities to save others, and this can be clearly seen with his interaction with Megumi right before his fight with Hanami. He says the same words as he did back in the prison, yet they carry a different feel to them. Yuji's growth continues with the end of Season 1, where we see him fight with the brothers. Although Nobara is easily able to move on from killing them, Yuji finds it difficult. Even if they were the enemy, he still sympathized with them since they displayed human emotions. Season 1 displays Yuji's character really well, but I think a lot of his growth comes in the manga. Shibuya acts as a turning point for Yuji as a character. Shibuya completely breaks Yuji down time and time again without remorse. The arc begins with him at his peak, killing a semi-special grade curse with ease. His confidence brings him all the way to Choso, where he gets brutally shut down. He is not as strong as he needs to be. He can't just simply brute force his way through this fight. After losing the fight, Yuji is fed 11 fingers at once, which causes Sukuna to appear. Sukuna goes on a rampage, destroying Jogo and Shibuya as well. This destruction is shown to Yuji, which makes him sick. All this time where he believed he needed to live in order to protect the people he cared about was about to change. He thought that there was no point to delaying the execution anymore, he should just die now. He can't hurt anyone if he just died already. This breaks Yuji to the core, showing that even one slip-up can cause catastrophic damage to the innocent. Yuji finds the will to go on, just in time to be broken down again by Mahito. The same curse that took Junpei takes Nanami's life in front of Yuji. Nanami was someone Yuji looked up to, and to see him die in front of his eyes was just heartbreaking for him. All he had left was the words given to him, "You've got it from here." But this would be in vain, as Yuji was unable to keep up with Mahito. Mahito continues to grow throughout the fight, while Yuji can't seem to find the strength to compete with him, to grow alongside him in this fight. During the fight, Yuji sees Mahito get injured by one of Nobara's attacks. This boosts Yuji's will to go on, as it shows him he wasn't alone. In this dark, unforgiving arc, he still had friends by his side to push him forward. But, since Gege is ruthless, Mahito critically injures Nobara right in front of Yuji. This was a total breaking point for Yuji. Time after time, this world has done nothing but destroy and test Yuji's resolve. Mahito continued to beat Yuji. Yuji had already given up on ever winning. It wasn't until Todo showed up that Yuji is able to stand up on his feet as a sorcerer again. He understands now that his friends entrusted him with their wills to carry on, to finish this fight. As the fight continues, Yuji begins to understand when Mahito said, "You're me." Yuji understands that his role in the Jujutsu world is to continue killing curses over and over again. No matter what name or form Mahito would take, Yuji would continue to kill him again and again. He doesn't need a reason for it. Shibuya broke and rebuilt Yuji. He carries the weight of the lives he took and the friends he wasn't strong enough to save. This carries into the Culling Games with his fight with Higuruma. He gets accused of mass murder, and he doesn't try to deny it. He accepts that Sukuna was his responsibility, and that because of him, innocent people died. Yuji continues to become more and more interesting as the manga progresses, and I can't wait to see how Gege ends his story. Megumi's character is one I find that is often slept on. Megumi is a quiet yet lovable character that puts himself in front of others in order to protect and save them. Unlike Yuji, Megumi doesn't decide to save everyone no matter who they are. Megumi only wishes to save people he deems as good. This can be shown as early as episode 1 and 2, where Megumi is trying to stop the curse that's after the finger in the school. He sacrifices himself by saving Yuji, knowing that Yuji cannot win this fight and would ultimately have to run and leave Megumi behind to die. But even after Megumi accepted his fate, Yuji didn't. Yuji eats the finger to save Megumi and in turn has to pay the consequences. In episode 2, after Gojo asks Megumi what they think they should do with Yuji, he acknowledges that by Jujutsu law, they should exorcise Yuji, but he sees him as a good person who doesn't deserve such a fate and therefore wishes to protect him. A point in the first season that highlights the differences in ideologies between Megumi and Yuji is the prison episode. Yuji expects to go into the prison and save the inmates, while even before knowing their fate, Megumi had no intention of saving them. He doesn't see them as worth saving. Since Megumi cares a lot about his friends, he often plays for the team rather than playing for himself. This can be seen in the baseball episode, where instead of going for a home run, he goes for a strategic bunt. As Gojo pointed out, the bunt isn't a bad move. It got Nobara to the next base, but in turn Megumi sacrificed the possibility of getting to the base himself. The reason why he often plays for the team is that he often wants to take the easy way out with summoning his trump card. While yes, the trump card would win the battle, he would ultimately cost his life with it. I love that at the end of Season 1, we can see Megumi grow as a character because instead of taking the easy way out, he becomes greedier. He summons his domain against the cursed spirit and wins. This small growth shows how the people around Megumi influence him and are allowing Megumi become more confident in his skills as a sorcerer. Megumi's growth only continues in the manga. A big moment for Megumi happens in Shibuya, where he is fighting his father without even knowing it. After finding out that his son took the name Fushiguro instead of Zenin, he ends his life. While I'm sure Megumi didn't know that it was his father at the time, it's just cool to see Megumi growing up the way his father wanted without even knowing him. While he has fantastic moments in Shibuya, I think a lot of his growth is going to come with the Culling Games. Megumi enters the Culling Games in order to save Gojo and his sister. Since his sister's life is on the line, you can see the demeanor in Megumi change. We get to see this in his fight with Reggie, where he doesn't hesitate to kill or harm curse users in his way. He even summons his full domain expansion against Reggie in order to secure a victory. As the art goes on, I'm sure we will get to see Megumi continue to grow as a character. Nobara is a character I think about when JJK breaks shonen stereotypes. Often in other anime, the main female lead has only a few characteristics about them. It may come in the form of being useless, or a love interest, or even fan service. Now, when being useless contributes to their overall character arc, I believe that's fine, but majority of the time, they're useless just to be useless. When the female lead is used as a love interest, again, that's not always bad, but for most love interests, that's all they act as. They aren't characters. Fanservice is something that I just don't understand in anime and manga. Yes, while it's great, you get to see boobs in anime, I just find that it's kind of pulling away from the experience. It's more distracting than it is enjoyable. Nobara breaks these stereotypes, and that's what makes her character so enjoyable. She's got that brash, rough attitude like other female leads like Sakura, but she has a sort of charm to it that makes it enjoyable to watch. She's also purposely drawn to not give off any fan service, which I really appreciate. While also not being one of the strongest sorcerers, she can most definitely hold her own and do some crazy shit. I think it's most clearly shown in the last fight in the anime, where she and Yuji are fighting the brothers. I think it's hard to think of times in shonen where the main character and female lead both carry their weight in a fight, but Gege has successfully done it. Nobara was so crucial in this fight that they wouldn't have won it without her technique. I think she truly shines in this fight, and seeing her go so sadistic is awesome to see. I also appreciate how in the Goodwill event arc, we get to see her interaction with Momo. Momo talks about the standards for women in the Jujutsu world and how different they are compared to men. They are pressured to be pretty and strong and to be perfect, to overcome their upbringings like Mai and Maki. But Nobara doesn't care. One of my favorite lines from her is, "I love myself when I'm pretty and dressed up, and I love myself when I'm strong." This shows Nobara's resolve of being herself and not caring what others expect of her, nor what they think of her. A big moment for her character happens with her talk with Yuji after their fight with the brothers. Nobara seems to be handling it a lot better than Yuji. She explains how she thinks differently than him. There's only so many seats open in her life, and she wants to protect those people sitting at them. She also states that there's people like Yuji or Megumi and Gojo and Maki that bring their own chairs and sit down. Nobara shows JJK breaking stereotypes perfectly. Now, we all know what comes next. She eventually loses against Mahito and is presumed dead. But even when facing death, she was able to have resolve, saying, "Tell everyone it wasn't so bad." While I don't think she's dead, I think it would be okay for her to be. She can continue to grow as a character, but I think this place would be a natural ending point for her story. Of course, she never got to keep her promise of finding Sayori in Tokyo, which hurts to see happen, but I think overall, Nobara's character has just reached a natural conclusion at this point. That's not to say I wouldn't love to see her come back. She's a very enjoyable character that I would love to see come back. I hope that if she does come back, she's able to get some sort of power buff, since Yuji and Megumi have only continued to grow stronger in her absence. Gojo is my personal favorite JJK character. I love his charisma and charm in the first season of the anime. He was just so lovable that anytime he was on the screen, my eyes were glued to it. With him being the strongest in the verse, it's no wonder that every fight he has goes crazy. Gojo being so powerful has a lot of responsibility. The higher-ups don't like him for his rebelliousness and wanting to change the system. While he is fully capable of killing all the higher-ups, he even states that wouldn't solve the problem since they would just be replaced. Gojo became a teacher to help train students into becoming sorcerers like him, fighting for what they believe is right and rather than just being fearful of the unknown. This can be shown when Gojo goes out of his way to protect both Yuji and Yuta, who are both special cases to the JJK world. The higher-ups feared both of them and wanted them executed right away, but Gojo saw the potential and good nature they both possessed. Gojo is a character who truly loves and cares for his students. Gojo's existence stabilizes the Jujutsu world. Gojo was born with both the 6 eyes and the limitless technique, and with the combination of these two powers, his existence made curses go into hiding in fear of him. This sense of power would go to Gojo's head during his teenage years at Jujutsu High. He often looked down on others for being weak and didn't see a point in helping people below him. This contrasts with his best friend Geto, where he talks about how it's the strong's responsibility to help the weak. Over the course of the Star Plasma Vessel arc, we see Gojo become more caring for someone weaker than him, even staying awake for 3 days straight to ensure Riko could enjoy the last few days of her life. In the end, Geto and Gojo come to the agreement to let Riko decide what she wants to do. They won't hesitate to go against the system because they believed they were the strongest. But as we know, Gojo loses his fight against Toji and Riko pays the price. After recovering and being able to use reverse curse technique, Gojo fights Toji again, not for revenge, but to simply feel how powerful he's become. It's a sort of power high for him. This can be seen in the iconic "Throughout heaven and earth, I alone am the honored one." This arc changes Gojo's perspective to be more like Geto's. His responsibility as the strongest is to ensure that the weaker can live. As Gojo continues to become stronger, he leaves Geto behind on the power scale. No longer were they the strongest together, Gojo alone is the strongest. After dealing with Riko's death, Geto begins to question his morals. He eventually starts to believe that this world would be better off with just sorcerers. This is because sorcerers are able to control their curse energy, which means curses would cease to exist. As long as humans continue to give off cursed energy, curses will continue to form and sorcerers will continue fighting for the weak. The point of no return happens when Geto massacres a village for enslaving 2 young sorcerers. Gojo eventually confronts Geto in front of the iconic KFC and claims that his plan is impossible. This is one of my favorite interactions in the manga because it shows how different each of these sorcerers has become since the start of the arc. Geto claims if Gojo wanted to annihilate all non-sorcerers, he could, because he's the strongest. One of my favorite lines in the series is one that Geto says to Gojo: "Are you the strongest because you're Satoru Gojo, or are you Satoru Gojo because you're the strongest?" If Gojo is the strongest because he's Gojo, that means there is a deeper meaning to his character. While he's the strongest, it's simply a part of him rather than being what makes him. If he were Gojo because he is the strongest, it would imply that his power is the only thing that defines him. These words would hold Gojo back from ending Geto at that moment. He realized that while he was the strongest, he wasn't using his power to change the world. This plays into his drive of teaching the next generation rather than simply running wild with his power. He wants to use it to ensure that future generations are able to change the system their way rather than with brute force. In Volume 0, we see Gojo finally end Geto's life, and before he does, he mutters words that the reader doesn't know. While maybe we might learn it later in the manga, I kind of like the mystery of not knowing what he said. This death would leave Gojo ultimately alone. Eventually, we get to Shibuya, where we all know his fate, to be sealed in the prison realm, unknown when it will be reopened. The side cast in JJK is one of my favorites. They have such enjoyable characters that I just can't help but look forward to with each and every interaction. In the anime, we have such great characters like Maki, Yuta, Nanami, and Todo, and even in the manga, we have some really cool characters that get introduced like Hakari and Toji. They have this sense of likability that I feel is just lacking in other side casts and other new gens. Overall, JJK simply makes for such a unique experience that I haven't had with any other new gen. My love for the series only continues to grow with each chapter, and I can't wait to see how Gege ends this story. I'm also really excited to see all this manga content covered in Season 2. It's truly going to be something seeing all these anime-onlys reacting to it. Thank you all for watching. Let me know what your favorite new gen is in the comments below, and I'll see you all next time.